1991. A dusty mailroom inside MTV headquarters. Somewhere in the stacks, a VHS tape whirs, the reels clicking softly as if impatient to be played. An intern flips past it without looking, the label catching the light for just a second. Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. The junior programmer who reviewed it called it too noisy, said it didn't fit the format. So the video never aired, the song never broke. The world kept spinning, just slightly off-key. In this timeline, grunge stayed in Seattle basements, the flannel trend never left thrift stores, Cobain was never on a lunchbox, and MTV never made room for the underground. This is the story of what we lost when grunge never broke.
Before YouTube, before streaming, there was one channel that decided which bands lived or died: MTV. If they played your video, you didn't just get famous, you rewrote the culture. By 1990, they were in over 60 million homes. Every song you hummed, every look you copied, was chosen in a conference room in Midtown Manhattan, where executives debated trends like generals mapping out a war. Picture a Thursday afternoon in the programming room. Posters of Madonna and Bon Jovi on the walls, cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling, a row of CRT monitors playing back-to-back music videos, one nod from the head programmer, and a band's future changes forever. Somewhere in America, a kid is racing home from school to catch the world premiere of their favorite band's new video. If MTV picks it, they'll talk about it all week in the cafeteria. If they don't, it might as well not exist. The airwaves were spotless. Pop idols with perfect choreography, hair metal ballads shot through a haze of dry ice. But while the glitter blinded the cameras, something jagged was rattling the basement walls in Seattle. Loud, mumbled, and drenched in distortion. And it was only getting louder. And then, the underground found its crack in the wall. In September 1991, an unmarked VHS made it past the gatekeepers. Smells Like Teen Spirit. Loud, messy, and unlike anything MTV had put in rotation. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the video slipped into the rotation. In living rooms across America, kids froze mid-bite over their after-school snacks. A janitor in a dusty high school gym spun in slow motion on the screen, Cobain snarling into the mic as the guitars kicked in. Phone lines at MTV lit up, not with polite requests, but with, "What the hell was that?" Within weeks, hairspray and spandex were out. Thrift store flannel was in. The underground wasn't underground anymore. It was the soundtrack of a generation. Now, what if that tape never made it out of the mailroom? And MTV had already decided who would take Nirvana's place. In this timeline, the tape stays shelved. MTV's flagship slot doesn't go to Nirvana. It goes to Warrant, Poison, and the last gasps of hair metal. On the night Nirvana would have exploded, America instead gets Poison's new single, a power ballad shot on a soundstage dripping with fake rain and blinding spotlights. The camera lingers on teased hair, slow motion spins, and leather pants reflecting the pyros. Teenagers watching from their parents' living rooms nod along politely, but no one's diving off couches. No one's calling their friends to say, "You have to see this." MTV gets a quiet night instead of a cultural earthquake. Meanwhile, in a cramped Seattle club, Nirvana plays to 30 people. The same song that could have detonated across 60 million homes, rattling the walls for a tiny crowd. No cameras, no confetti. Just distortion swallowed by the room. And without that shot, the ripple effects touch far more than just music. With Seattle's sound still trapped in basements, the 90s never find their anthem for alienation. Teenagers looking for something real turn to what's left: gangster rap, industrial metal, or whatever MTV crowns next. By 93, TRL arrives early. In a suburban living room, a 14-year-old girl screams as a boy band debuts their new single, every move choreographed down to the eyebrow raise. Her brother rolls his eyes. This isn't rebellion, it's rehearsal. On the other side of the country, a design student flips through Vogue. No Marc Jacobs grunge shock on the runway, no flannel or combat boots on models. Just neon leather, glitter, and hairspray. As if the 80s never ended. In a dim Seattle coffee shop, a kid in a thrifted cardigan strums quietly. Without seeing themselves on MTV, they think they're the only one. Their tribe exists, scattered and unseen. And for Kurt Cobain, invisibility changes everything. In our world, Cobain's voice became the howl of a generation. Here, it's barely heard outside dingy Seattle clubs. No screaming fans, no stadium chants, just cigarette smoke, and a few dozen strangers who don't yet know they're in the same tribe. There's no haunting MTV Unplugged performance, no candles, no raw, unfiltered "where did you sleep last night" that sends chills down spines decades later. The moment that showed the world grunge's quiet power never exists. There's no Reading Festival headliner in a hospital gown, no smirk to the cameras before detonating into Breed. Instead, that slot goes to a safe, established act, a band built for stadium fireworks, not catharsis. And Dave Grohl, still behind the drums, a lifer in the background. No Foo Fighters, no Everlong, no stadium sing-alongs to keep rock alive into the 2000s. We didn't just lose a band, we lost the anthems that told millions of outsiders they weren't alone. And you can't measure that on any chart, but some would say, maybe that was a good thing. Some argue that staying underground was the only way to keep grunge pure. Without MTV, it never got watered down, never became mech alternative, rebellion packaged for the masses. But purity came at a cost. Without a stage big enough to unite them, millions of misfit kids never knew there were others like them. The tribe stayed scattered, voices never joined in the same chorus. Imagine if Pearl Jam had been the breakout instead. Still Seattle, but sleeker, cleaner, easier to sell. Maybe grunge survives, but without Nirvana's raw chaos, it becomes background music for coffee shops instead of an anthem for outsiders. Or worse, maybe a label invents its own grunge act from scratch. Flannel as costume, distortion as branding. The sound reaches millions, but it's an echo with no soul. So, was it better to keep the music untouched but unheard? Or to let it go wide, knowing it would be polished and sold back to you? That's the choice this alternate history leaves us with. And it's not the only history that could have broken differently. This was the day MTV almost erased grunge from history. In this world, Cobain never broke through, and the soundtrack of the 90s was written by someone else. So which would you choose? A pure underground sound that never goes mainstream, or a messy, commercialized version that still reaches millions of outsiders who need to hear it? Drop pure or popular in the comments, and tell me why. Every answer builds the alternate history together. And if you think this was the biggest what if in music, picture a world where YouTube never existed. No viral launches, no overnight sensations. Just a handful of gatekeepers deciding what the entire internet gets to see. If alternate history like this keeps you up at night arguing with friends, then hit that subscribe button. There's more like this coming.